Yeah, this one's gonna be short and sweet, relatively speaking. We waited for a couple updates. The OnePlus 12 continues to impress. It's a solid all-rounder camera, and Oppo is making some very smart decisions with this camera hardware. Ultimately, it feels like the brand has returned to a core mission of undercutting Samsung and Apple while delivering competitive and often better performance. This is especially true if we're lining up the best slate phone from OnePlus against phones like the Galaxy S24 and the iPhone 15. The non-pro, non-ultra phones struggle to keep up dollar for dollar against OP. And really tearing into these cameras, the output and performance is exceedingly similar to the OnePlus Open. It's why I'm not doing a full-on camera deep dive for the 12 when you can watch that other video and I'd be repeating a lot of the same stuff. But there are a couple of small differences and an odd feature change here and there. And of course, we'll chat about that camera sensor controversy. It's just hard to get much worked up over some of those perceived issues though when we're treated to such a solid all-around consumer point-and-shoot camera. This new triple stack of cameras punches above the phone's price tag. A brand new Sony sensor on our main wide camera, that great OmniVision telephoto, and a proper high-res camera on the ultra wide. It's a total package for a triple camera layout, and this is what's clever. Kind of like what Vivo did this year, none of this kit is the most expensive or the most bleeding edge camera tech, but it's picked well for the MSRP of the whole phone and keeps the feel very consistent as you move through the camera app. Now, there aren't many moments where you look up a camera feature and it's not available on all three rear sensors, like Vivo, but aiming for a lower price point, which it doesn't feel at all like a cheaper phone. Oppo in general seems to be aiming slightly more in a pixel-style photography direction, while Xiaomi is trying to move up into more legitimately professional controls. OnePlus is not delivering the most complete app, but you can go pretty deep before I feel folks will struggle with limitations from the OnePlus software. And what we get is a punchy HDR look. We get vibrant images, and on the phone screen, there's that extra splash of brightness from the Pro XDR presentation mode. The OnePlus pushes a touch brighter, where a pixel might drive a bit more contrast, but both deliver fun, finished photos for social media. Against a Pixel, the main difference in feel is that extra processing or shutter lag. Even Samsung has tightened this up quite a bit. In full auto mode, you can't quite land the exact moment you hit the shutter. And often, the phone will select the sharpest moment even if you end up with some odd facial expressions. For just pulling a phone out of your pocket and snapping a pic, I still do. I feel Google is really confident in their face unblurring tech, and it selects smiles better than OnePlus can. I don't love that processing style, where HDR is valued above exposure and subject movement. Now, there are separate toggles here to throw on in action mode. It's that little extra moment to consider. It works well when activated. It does abbreviate that kind of processing time, but you have to know it's there and tap it in that moment you're also thinking about capturing a shot. So if you're trying to get a spontaneous moment, it's stuff like that. It might make you miss the moment you're trying to capture. Still, I appreciate we have a quicker option. And alongside the new exposure controls, I really like how OnePlus handles exposure. Most phones shoot too bright IMO, and I regularly just keep the 12 and the OnePlus Open underexposing a third, sometimes 2/3 of a stop. The differences between the two phones are minimal. For all the comments I received on my first videos, people acting like OnePlus was cheaping out on the 12 or something like that, it was pretty foolish stuff. I believe the open camera sensor is a more expensive sensor. It's designed to go in a more expensive phone, and it's built to live in a more expensive design, namely a folding phone, very thin panels, because there's more pricing buffer to absorb these costs. The Open needs to deal with a more limited panel depth, and that restricts the aperture we can use. It's why we can't fixate on one specific spec, and a camera should really be judged holistically. So I think OnePlus made the right choice here. The more expensive version of this sensor in the more expensive design with more severe physical limitations. The traditional slate phone can use a slightly larger camera bump in assembly and include a slightly larger aperture. And that's all we really seem to need to deliver comparable performance between the two. That little extra nudge of sensor performance wouldn't help us a whole lot on the OnePlus 12, but it would nudge up the manufacturing costs. But on a more expensive device, it would have stood out more if the Open were a slightly poorer performer. For some reason in the tech media, Samsung is allowed to put poorer cameras on its most expensive phone, but OnePlus would have been eviscerated by reviewers if it were to do something similar on the Open. It means there is just a slight advantage to the Open in terms of handling highlights. Subtle improvements to dynamic range from that sensor and the slightly smaller aperture means the Open has a touch more buffer for reining in bright moments that the OnePlus 12 might start to clip. It's incredibly difficult to demonstrate that in a practical way that might matter to consumers, even folks interested in driving their phone cameras harder. It just hasn't mattered to me in shooting between the two phones. And I'm really looking for those differences. The last major difference between the two, I don't like how OnePlus is handling master mode on the OnePlus 12. The Open has two options for RAW files, RAW and RAW Plus. I like that combo. We can get a traditional RAW file from a single exposure or stack a bracket of processed DNG files into one squished image. The 12 does not seem to do this. There is no RAW Plus option. And I thought that maybe this had moved to the Pro versus Auto toggle, but that doesn't seem to change the output significantly. I really don't get this. What's the point of that toggle? If you don't change any settings, the phone will shoot full auto. It tucks the controls out of the way, and that looks a little tidier, but it's a dumb extra switch that delivers no actual practical functionality that I can determine. Instead, I wish I had a processed RAW mode here. That is actually useful on the OnePlus Open. I do like the other addition though, having quick access to change up JPEG processing options. It can help you craft a specific look for the finished image. And I wish more phones would apply this as forward or as simply as OnePlus does this here. It's a quick tap, move some sliders, and you can really fine-tune your finished image. So yeah, we get through that, and the rest of this is really familiar. We've got the fun modes like X-Pan, 8K video is only available on the main camera. There still is no pro mode for video, but the movie mode can almost bridge that gap. I really wish OnePlus would give us focus peaking on this phone. The cameras are good enough and you get a shallow enough depth of field to give us that visual aid for critical focus. And it was just fun. I blew my mom's mind with the text scanning feature, a nice little AI perk in correcting for off angles and making a document more readable. The overall photo and gallery app has gotten some nice quality of life improvements. We can now link Google Photos for backing up images. I don't do that just to save on Google Cloud storage space. I hope someday we can maybe plug in other cloud services like my OneDrive. That would be more helpful because I am still paying for more OneDrive. In addition to the object detection, there's an improved spot eraser. It's not as good as Google Magic Eraser or Microsoft's new generative erase, but it's pretty decent for small edits and it works crazy fast. Just a tiny little thing that might be distracting in your photo and you just kind of finger paint over it, and it's pretty quick. So we can go ahead and wrap this up. There's not much that can pressure OnePlus near this price point. Yeah, I've been pointing this out since the OnePlus 8 Pro, that the price to performance on OnePlus has always been very good, but now OnePlus is executing a much more mature and polished experience. I really have to reach for things that might make a purchasing decision, like I still miss 4K 120 from the OnePlus 10 Pro, but it's an ever-diminishing list of omissions because OnePlus keeps tacking on really good quality of life photography features. It's just a darn fun camera. Anymore, OnePlus is handily delivering a great option. I think there's a sick thrill for techies to dig up controversy, and OnePlus is an easy brand to target. Now, for issues that they would usually overlook on a Samsung, you can point them out here, and you'll get some sort of outrage traffic from OnePlus fans, while Samsung and Apple owners will nod along. But lately, the results have been speaking for themselves. For a couple of years now, a good camera is a good camera. And it's even better when it's this price competitive. I'm gonna go ahead and cap this video right here. If you want that deeper dive on like the photo IQ and the color and the processing, it is exceedingly similar to the OnePlus Open, and you can rewatch that video or watch it for the first time if you haven't caught it already, and you'll get a much clearer idea of where OnePlus is going with their photo and video chops. As always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing the Patreon posts, bringing more people to this Patreon project, some fun geeks to talk about this stuff. These are Patreon exclusives. This one too it's just for you. And I really appreciate all the help and support, and also all the conversations that we have here on the Patreon really helps drive the direction of where I'm going to be going with my content. So don't be shy with the comments here. I'd much rather be chatting with y'all here than kind of slumming it in the YouTube comments, which are more often than not garbage. Or if you absolutely have to, we can chat across the rest of social media at SomeGadgetGuy around the web. But these days, trying to spend a bit more time on the Mastodons, and I will catch you all on the next review.